And I think that's going to be the biggest change over the next 10 years in e-commerce, where we go from getting things from thousands of kilometers away to actually getting them from within your city, and being able and visually to be able to, when you look for those trainers or those sneakers online, that actually you can see them in your city and get them delivered whenever you want at the end of the day, when you're back at home or in your office, or literally in 30 minutes through a company like Glovo. And Glovo can be part of that. And that's what we call quick commerce, Q-commerce, which I think is going to be the fastest growing. Well, it is today. It's the fastest growing area of e-commerce. And I think it's going to be a good percentage of e-commerce in the future, which is this immediate, quick delivery, things very local to you. And that, the companies who can do that really well are going to be these local stores and restaurants and chains.
Ciao, io sono Marco Imperato e questo è il podcast di Product Heroes. Product Heroes è il punto di riferimento in Italia per il product management. Finora abbiamo aiutato oltre 180.000 persone tramite master, formazione in azienda, guide, articoli e meetup. Lo facciamo anche attraverso questo podcast in cui intervisto product leader che spaccano e che potranno darti tantissimi consigli utili per migliorare il tuo modo di costruire, lanciare e muovere le metriche del tuo prodotto. L'ospite di questa puntata è Sacha Michaud, che è co-founder di Glovo. Sacha è un imprenditore inglese seriale con oltre 15 anni di esperienza. Nel 97 ha fondato la società Latin Red, uno dei maggiori fornitori di servizi internet in Spagna, per poi venderla a Star Media circa 2 anni dopo. Poi ha fondato altre aziende, tra cui Inlander, venduta nel 2000, e Binaria, agenzia comunicazione digitale di successo, e anche Transworld, società di traduzione online. Insomma, Sacha ha fatto davvero di tutto. Dopo 9 anni alla guida del team di Betfair Iberia, alla fine del 2014 si è unito a Oscar Pierre per creare Glovo. In questo episodio proprio parliamo di Glovo, uno dei leader della delivery in Europa, recentemente acquisito dal gruppo Delivery Hero. Glovo processa ogni giorno quasi 1 milione di ordini, è presente in 25 paesi, circa 1500 città, e sulla piattaforma ci sono circa 8.000 corrieri attivi ogni mese. Parliamo di negozi, ristoranti e grandi catene. La cosa che in tanti non sanno è che in realtà Glovo è uno dei maggiori agenti della digitalizzazione nel mondo. Infatti, di solito PMI, piccoli negozi locali, ristoranti si affidano a Glovo proprio per la loro digitalizzazione dei processi. Inoltre in questa intervista parliamo dei primi passi di Glovo, di come Sacha e Oscar, l'altro co-founder, stanno gestendo l'espansione mondiale del brand e dei punti di forza di questa applicazione. Uno per tutti, l'attenzione maniacale alla customer experience. Non ti dico altro se non di seguire il podcast fino alla fine e di lasciarci una review con 5 stelle su Spotify o sulla piattaforma su cui ci stai ascoltando, se ancora non l'hai fatto. Questo ci aiuterà ad impattare ancora più persone e diffondere ancora più velocemente la cultura di prodotto in Italia, che poi è la nostra missione. Adesso non mi resta che augurarti buon ascolto e ricordarti che dopo i tempi duri vengono sempre tempi eroici. Hi Sacha, welcome to Product Heroes.
Hi, nice. Thanks for inviting.
Thanks for being here. So let's start with your personal story. What's your story? You are a very successful entrepreneur, co-founder, founder. I mean, you did kind of everything. If you go through your LinkedIn profile, I mean, you did everything. So can you give us a little bit of background?
Yeah, no, I consider myself successful because really I've been doing pretty much my whole career what I wanted to do and what I enjoy doing. So that for me is the biggest success. No, I've got I think unfamiliar or probably not very usual way of how I've arrived here. So I actually left home at 16 and was 5 years. I was a professional jockey, a racehorse jockey, not a disc jockey, not a DJ, which is quite popular today, and very unconventional in that sense. And I was racing I'm British Canadian. I was born in London, and I was racing in the UK for 4 years, and then I spent 1 year in the US. And by accident, I arrived in Barcelona, where in Spain there's not a tradition with horse racing, and I loved Barcelona. So I said, what am I going to do here? And I luckily, thanks to who knows who, I decided to computer program and learned to computer program. And I became a programmer and was working, and then this crazy thing came along called the internet. And I said, wow, this is amazing. How, almost taking barriers away of communication. We're talking the sort of mid-90s, late 90s. And I set up a company and it went quite well. We're building websites and we're actually hosting domains and websites for And I also set up another company which was called Latin Red with a partner, and we were basically we built the first product which was a copy of Hotmail, which still exists today, which is a free email service, now part of Microsoft, but then it was, and we built a Spanish version of that, which took off and went super quick, and we built around that a number of other services like search, homepages, classifieds, built around 12 services around there. We became a very similar product to what Yahoo was in the first phase of the internet, and it was for Spanish speaking and went massive in Latin America, and we became the largest Spanish speaking community, I'd say, of services in the world. And we sold to our competitor, which was a US company, and together we went public on the Nasdaq from New York. So that was sort of the beginning. That company ended up being part of France Telecom, now Orange, and I spent a couple of years then with them. Then I spent the next 9 years in the gaming industry with a company called Betfair, which also went very big. We also took that public, and now today is the largest online gaming gambling company in the world. It's called Flutter, and that was an amazing experience of growth, of leading as well, of expansion to new markets. And at the beginning of 2015, the end of 2014, I met Oscar, and we decided to launch Glovo. So that's a quick pass on the last 20 plus years.
So big successes. So you told us that you first built a company and then you brought the company public on Nasdaq. How many years did it take from the foundation on the first venture?
So there was 2 companies went public that I was involved with. The first was Star Media, which was the company who acquired Latin Red. We went public on May 1999. Actually, I was not very involved in taking the company public because part of the agreement was they acquired us just before IPO.
Okay.
So they did that strategically for a couple of reasons. They took out one of their main competitors out of the market, very important. And number 2, we had a lot of traffic, so we had much more users, customers than they did. The market was giving them a huge valuation, and to bring in our user base potentiated them. So good examples. I think we were in those days we were talking about 12 million active users, which today is not a massive figure in today's time. But if you go back to 1999, it was huge. So they integrated us just before the IPO, and that's when we went public. And Betfair was a bit different. Betfair was a much more consolidated company, had a huge revenue stream, and we took. I think since I joined, I was one of the early international employees, but we probably took, since I joined, about 2.5 years, 3 years to go public.
Okay, so let's start talking about Glovo. That is your most recent venture and one of the most successful, hopefully. And can we start with some key figures about Glovo? So in how many countries you are, how many users?
Yeah, so today we're in 25 countries, in around 1,500 cities and towns worldwide. We're in different areas, so we're different continents, in fact, with very different problems to solve and very different markets. A good example is our home with Southern Europe, Spain, Italy, and Portugal, are key markets for us and early markets. Then we're in Central Eastern Europe, from Poland, Romania, Balkan region. We're in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Georgia, Armenia, Ukraine. So very big area for us. And then much more recently, we've been focusing on growth in Africa. So it's North Africa, Morocco, and Tunisia, and Sub-Saharan Africa, which is Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Uganda, Ghana, Kenya. So very, very diverse areas, very different. I just arrived yesterday from a week in Ivory Coast, which is a market we've been in for close to 4 years. And so, yeah, very, very interesting. We've been growing, very quickly over the last 4 or 5 years in different areas. Many of these emerging markets for us. We have more consolidated markets where we've been in a lot longer, like Spain, which is where we launched, and obviously Italy was our second country, and Portugal. But yeah.
How many like users or orders per day? I mean, the way in which you measure growth, you have globally right now, considering all the countries and cities.
Yeah, I mean, we don't give global numbers like that, but I can give you just a rough estimate. So again, we're in 25 countries, 1,500 cities. We've got close to 80,000 active couriers on the platform every month. These are couriers, as you know, that some do work very few hours. It's very flexible, and they dedicate as an extra income on top of other jobs they're doing. Some are more dedicated, but then we have about 80,000 active couriers. Our partners are these are the local stores and restaurants, and large chains. Of course, we work with them, and these are key because this is the content that our customers find on the app. And also with close to 180,000 active partners, 95%, it depends on the country, but between 90 and 95% are SMEs, or small businesses, with one or maybe two establishments. So this would be the typical local restaurant who's got a great product and be on the app. But we also, of course, work with some of the biggest brands and the biggest chains. And we're getting close to a million orders a month globally. Sorry, a million orders a day.
Okay. That's impressive.
Yeah.
I can imagine your feeling like building Glovo just 8 years ago and coming back from Ivory Coast. So how do you feel like building this thing with your co-founder being 5-6 people in Barcelona, and then after that you see Glovo backpack in Africa?
Yeah, that's probably there's probably two things that really make me super proud, and that is when you go to these countries which are very different from where we launched, in Spain, in Barcelona and Madrid, and you see our yellow backpacks there and the impact, and also the fact that in many countries, to be a global courier is quite important in the local communities, because generally the income is relatively high compared to similar jobs. So there's often massive demand to be a courier, not just because of the flexibility, but the fact that I think in Ivory Coast, the minimum salary for a job basically in Glovo, you can literally earn 4 times as much per month being a courier. So actually, the impact in local communities is amazing, and the feedback. And I regularly go out and do deliveries when I travel, pretty much every country, and meet the couriers, and you get the sense of that. And then also digitalization of local stores and restaurants. Many their first digital transaction ever is through Glovo. The first time they've ever sold online is through us. So yeah. Well, in fact, in many regions, actually, I mean, we've been a few years in many of the countries, but a good example would be, that they weren't generally on Google Maps. They had no need. So actually, the first step is actually get on Google Maps, and then we can integrate them into our. So that being part of the digitalization of economies, we're a small part. There's others doing it, of course, and also positive impact in local communities is huge. And then for me, the visibility is amazing when I arrive in a city and you see the impact. And sometimes the impact of Glovo is huge because we're a massive market leader in many cities. So you just arrive and you just see our yellow bags everywhere. It makes me super proud.
So first time we met, you told me the story of how Glovo started and the first time you met Oscar. And I find it very inspiring. So I would like you to share with our audience.
Yes. So I mentioned earlier, I was in the gaming industry for about 9 years, and I thought I wanted to do something different. Uber were sort of just making a name for themselves in ride hailing in the US, of how they built an app in a smartphone that could really revolutionize the way people would order what was then a taxi, in a different way. And I thought it would be amazing to do something similar, but instead of moving people around your city, but you can move things. No, you could order anything you wanted, and or move, or pick up anything you wanted. And I thought there would be an opportunity there through a smartphone as that was evolving. So really, have your city in your smartphone, or what our vision is to give everyone easy access to anything in the city. And I was thinking this idea around, and I had a couple of investors, and we were looking how to launch that. And Oscar just came back from the US. He was studying in the US in Georgia Tech, and they told me this kid, he was 22 then, had a similar idea and should meet him. He was very smart. And I met him and I really, really thought he had huge potential. So I asked him, how he initially he contacted me as a potential investor, and I met him, and I really liked it. I said, can I invest in your project? And number two, I'm thinking with a couple of people doing something similar. Maybe we should do this together. And I think he made a few phone calls to find out who the hell I was, and he wanted to do this project with me. And luckily, somebody gave some good feedback. And I invested in the first round, which was just over 100K. It was, I think, 140K, our first seed round. And I joined him on this adventure at the beginning of 2015. And literally, we went very quickly. We launched. It's now an MVP, but then it wasn't. We didn't think it was an MVP. But our first version of Glovo, literally, we had the first orders in March 2015. So it literally, 3 months after putting together the company. So super quickly, we launched in Barcelona. In the end, the MVP was an MVP. We had to rebuild everything, but it was a good choice because we were in the market very quickly, getting traction, creating buzz. People started talking about us very quickly, about this app that you could literally get anything in your city, and actually worked, which a lot of people, I send emails about 100 friends saying I'm launching this new project, please test it out. And then I got great feedback. Hey, it works. And I said, yeah, of course it does.
So when you were entering the market, there were already, I think, other players like Just Eat, Deliveroo already, or were you the first one?
So Just Eat was definitely in most markets. Just Eat, they were focused primarily only on restaurant food, and also generally tier two restaurants. So not local heroes, not the big chains. One of my massive focuses when we launched Glovo was trying to get McDonald's to work with us, and I'd call them regularly, and I'd get a contact, hey, and they would just not even return my calls. Or delivery wasn't on their agenda. Literally for the first 2 years of Glovo, but a lot of our customers would order McDonald's anyway because we had a button where you could order anything in the city. So actually, they could send a courier. He would go there. He would pay, do the queue, wait, and deliver. So the UX wasn't great, but people could get McDonald's through Glovo the way we. And what happened was, so again, Just Eat were there. They were focused on definitely tier two products, very fast food. In those days, generally not necessarily low quality, but just standard, the typical pizzeria, kebabs and things like that. So a lot of the cool brands, cool local heroes, didn't want to be on a platform like that because the content the brand they're trying to build was very different to that. And also Just Eat would send the order to the restaurant, and the restaurant would then deliver. So the UX, they still do that. 80% of their business is based on, the order will come through and they'll just send it to the restaurant. So the UX was not very good at all. So, about 20-30% of orders actually would disappear. The user would send the order and go to the restaurant. They just couldn't deliver or whatever, and they'd have they'd be calling, hey, where's my order? 30 minutes later. No. So the UX was, and that was the opportunity for companies like Glovo Deliveroo received a lot of funding in the UK, and they started the European expansion, and they had a very good UX. They would have the same model as us, which they would, an order would come in, they would manage the order, they would send it to the restaurant, but at the same time, they would to the courier, and they would manage, and the UX for the user would know where the order was at every given time. So we had a very similar model, but our main difference was we were multi-category, so we weren't initially focused on restaurants. We were focused on anything, any retailer. So we'd bring anything from we're delivering clothes, or we're delivering groceries, a lot of grocery orders in the beginning, but restaurant, our customers were ordering from these very cool restaurants, and obviously we identified that restaurant was the way to grow the business, because customers were ordering more from restaurants than other things. But also we were very firm that we wanted to be in line to our vision, which is to give everyone easy access to anything in their city, not just restaurant food. So we were very different we had a lot of competitors coming into the markets, or the markets where we were operating. Uber Eats then a few years later launched. Uber had their ride hailing, but they actually launched what's today a very huge business for them, which was Uber Eats, which is also become a competitor. So yeah, we did have a lot of competitors with a lot more capital than us, and with clear goals to expand very quickly in many markets, many of the ones we were beginning to operate in.
I mean, a lot of questions are arising in my mind, because you're talking about two different things that I think are super important. So later market entry. So you were able to enter the market even if you were late, but with the precise strategy. At the same time, it's not just enough to enter a market and build your brand, but you have to, compete all the time with the new, entrants and incumbents as well. So can you give us an overview of the strategy? Because when you said, okay, when we met, you told us, okay, we started with Glovo everything, and obviously on the delivery of something at your home, we were losing money, but at the same time, it was like a unique product that nobody had at the time. And eventually, this became the way in which we were identified by our customers. Can you give us a little bit more?
Yeah, there's a few things I think we did quite well. So one is really focus on good service. So we've always tried to really focus on good service, and I think that's key to consumers, and not necessarily 25-minute delivery versus 32. It's make expectations, and I think we've generally done a very good job on that in all markets. So all these 25 markets I've mentioned, and even more markets that we've been in the past. I think we focused very much on user experience, and that's from the app all the way to the customer experience. I think getting the best content. When we talk about content, I'm talking about these local stores and restaurants. So I think that combination, and then a very good playbook, both from a launching playbook, so how you go into a new country, into a new big city, and how you execute that launch, combined with as well a very good growth strategy, and that generally has been very replicable, but not always. So sometimes you have to adapt it, of course, from different. Sometimes out of home. So if your strategy is to advertise in the city and billboards, of course, not every city and not every word could be, and just keep to our strategy, because we've had a lot of competitors who their main way of gaining market share or launching has been, giving promotions to customers, free deliveries, 2-for-1s, and that adulterates the market, because it generally, a customer who's attracted by that type of promotion and things like that is not a very valuable customer. And generally, if they're ordering something on a platform because it's promoted or it's a discounted or it's half the price, the moment another competitor in the market does something similar, they're just going to jump over there, and they will, what is known as multi-app. No, they'll just look for promotions all the time, and those type of customers, in the end of the day, are not very very valuable. They're not very linked to the brand, not very linked to the, and we've at all cost avoided that. And it's been tough because you have competitors who are just throwing money at the market, and to keep your strategy close, that we're going to focus on high value customers, and we're just going to keep that. Sometimes is very difficult, but I think we've kept firm to our strategy, and that has been key. And also, it hasn't been firm focused on our strategy over the last 2 years. We've pretty much done it over the last 8 years and been very, very disciplined, I would say, from an execution perspective.
Did you have a no, this time we won't make it through moment, like it's over, during your path in building Glovo, like a moment in which you thought that you couldn't push through, or it was something too hard to accomplish?
No, I think there's been different phases, but there's, as the company grows from 5 or 6 people to 40 to 200 or to 100, then 1,000 people. Now today we're, I think, close to 4,500 employees in the different offices, and I think that there's always, as we were growing and we had healthy growth, I think there was always a vision that we're growing something quite big. Having said that, fundraising is probably the thing we really had tough time fundraising, especially when we started growing outside of Spain and started needing real serious capital to compete with these big players that I mentioned earlier, who were multi-billionaires and have received funding. I mean, just Uber, what they received in funding, and how to be able to compete, in 10 markets with them was a real, I think, challenge. And in fundraising, we really had tough time fundraising. Pretty much all the big rounds in the last years were really trying to convince people that we can compete on a world scale.
If I'm not wrong, one of the last round was about 400 million euros, if I'm not wrong, something like that.
Yeah, well, we've received the round before, but now, almost 2 years ago now, we agreed the acquisition to form part of Delivery Hero.
Yeah. But my question was, can you describe us, because most of us haven't received the 400 millions in funding. So how do you manage that? So okay, you pitch everyone, you finally met the goal, so you are able to rise and monies are flowing in the company. Are you ready from day zero to deploy that capital? So how it works from receiving the money, investing that, how does it work?
No, when you get to that sort of scale, when your transaction on the platform, billions of euros of sales a year. At the end of the day, our restaurants and stores, that the amount of sales through our platform, you have a business plan, and at the end of the day, we align with the investors of where we're going over the next 18 months.
Okay.
And we buy into that project, and from the investment side of it, it's quite simple. Now, if I invest 200, 400 million at this stage, well, probably in 18 months, there's a good chance it's going to be worth a lot more, because the growth rate and the strategy is going to multiply that. So if I invested at GMV, which is basically gross sales on the platform at 1 billion, this can be in 3 billion in a couple of years, then this should potentially be a very good investment. And as long as the unit economics, and as long as they're coming into profitability, So at the end of the day, there's a lot of belief in the team and the execution. Also, there's a lot of alignment with funds. They generally like to go together. So when you have two or three large investors who are actually aligned on the vision and on the possibilities, because the issue is convincing those that actually the plan and we can compete on a scale with much bigger players. No, we was always Glovo was a little bit David versus Goliath in that sense. We're all the smaller player, but our execution was excellent. The local teams, pretty much in those 25 markets, and we'd actually launched in many others, and we've since left those markets. But 90% of our countries we're actually market leader.
Talking about the international expansion, so you acquired a few companies, and why did you decide right now you are in 25 countries, 1,500 cities. So how did you choose the global expansion strategy, like acquisition versus building by your own, entering a market, and when you choose one instead of the other, and why? I mean,
so very very different. I would say we didn't have. I mean, we've acquired a number of companies, and I think it was just somewhere more opportunistic. A good example was very early on. Our first acquisition was in Italy, in fact, where we launched very quickly, almost just close to a year, even slightly less, into Glovo. There was an opportunity. There was a small local player. The big brands had already launched in Italy, and we managed to do an acquisition. And also the GM, an entrepreneur, was very good, so he helped us launch Italy. So that was more opportunistic. And then there's been others where we've been very clear that we wanted to lead the market. Central Eastern Europe is a good example where we acquired a number of Delivery Heroes companies in that region, and we were clearly growing very well there. The team was executing excellently. We had very much, and this was to accelerate our leadership position. If we acquired some local brands, so it's been very, very different. I don't think it's been key to our strategy. We haven't gone out there and hey, let's grow by acquisition. But when there's an opportunity and it made economical sense, we tried to take advantage of that. And of course, some acquisitions have been better than others. It's very important, not just about acquiring customers and the business and economic, it's also the team and how they integrate with global culture and things like that. So I think it's been very the way we've identified different opportunities to acquisition.
what's the single most difficult thing when you acquire a new company? When you already acquire the company, I mean, you already acquired the company.
I think there's two things that are very important. I wouldn't. They're the most difficult, but also probably the most important. One is technical, and it's if you acquire an ongoing business, whether it's the sales of that business or the user base or the partner base in our case, or the couriers. The key is migrate. Our idea is to migrate them into Glovo. It's not to maintain a brand in that given countries, to do that migration very well seamlessly, so we get the maximum value. So if you acquire 100 users, well, ideally you want as many of those 100 users to be on Glovo the next day, and sometimes you only manage to migrate 50%. So in essence, the value of what you're integrating, you can lose that in the migration, a massive percentage. So I think that's very important, and over time we've definitely improved that. I think we've learned from our mistakes in a lot of cases, and actually improved that whole process. So that's very important from a just a pure business perspective, and then the team, especially if it's been a successful team and they've done well in that region, that country, is to try and keep them motivated to feel comfortable with that, with the way we run a business. Culture is very important, and I think those two, if you can get those right, put you in a very good position. And of course, you don't always get it right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was like stunned by the acquisition you made where I live in Sicily, in Palermo. And then what I was telling my wife last time, I mean, I didn't use like to order online very much because I knew very well the guys beyond the company that were here, but honestly, user experience was terrible. So actually, at the end of the day, I didn't order because I wasn't sure to get the food within an hour and a half. While having Glovo, it's crazy. It's like you guys think about everything one can possibly do first. And it's fun. It's strange to say, but it's fun to order because there is this circle you touch, everything is shaking. So it's like playing. You get credits and stuff. And the second thing that was super impressive to me was the customer support. I had issues, obviously, because the pizza can come. And they get in touch like in seconds, not even minutes. And you got immediately the refund. So at the end of the day, so one of the worst experience when you order online is that maybe you wait even more, like 45 minutes, 1 hour. Then the food is cold or is not okay. And then it's hell usually to get in touch with the company. In your case is another like dimension. And this in my personal like as a user, like I increase my retention like or my customer lifetime value, I think 5 to 6 times. So I order 5 to 6 times more. So my question is, how do you manage to have such a great customer experience? I'm not referring just to the UX or UI, but it's like everything is kind of mapped. So every like plan A, plan B, plan C is already happening when it happens actually. Do you have any special sauce?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned. So, just going in reference to acquisitions. To be honest, I mean, it's not a region, but social food is probably one of our best acquisitions ever. No, the way we've managed to get their user base, what they were doing really well, and they were doing a lot of things really well. Only focused on Sicily, and how we managed to almost, get their whole business and working on Glovo, apart from the business we already had in Sicily. So that is really considered a big success, and the team as well. I was recently there as well with the team. And then what you're talking about there is a, you know, the app. Our app has generally has been really praised by customers. Is what you're saying. It's fun. It's very different from other apps. Very simple with the bubbles, and you can just choose the categories, and I think we've done a great job from a UI perspective, no, from an interface that customers feel that it's cool, associate, it's the same color as our bags. There's a whole dynamics going on there that there's alignment. And then the second part is what I've said earlier on in the podcast. It's user experience, and that goes what you see in the app to how it's executed and how you can see your order at every given time. Make sure your expectations are reached. No, if we're saying we're going to do in 25 minutes, well, more or less do that. And then, unfortunately, sometimes things go wrong. We're a three-pronged marketplace, right? So that many times our local stores and restaurants, our partners, could have a saturated kitchen, or could have issues that they can't. So to make that the courier could be in traffic, or could have problems. So that to make all that work seamlessly is very difficult. But there's always going to be moments where whatever things don't work out. No, simple things like a restaurant not having ingredients. I mean, that can happen. When you're in the restaurant, the waiter will come to you and say, "Sorry, we don't have that dish anymore." But digitally, customers expect something different. So to make all that work is a lot down to local team, local execution, deciding what's right, no? And we've got a great team in Sicily, who obviously, if you're saying what you're saying, and the numbers as well, showing that Sicily is generally, great growth place for us. Obviously, market leader. Everything, the team is doing a great job there.
So the last question before jumping into a few more personal questions. So you mentioned, and obviously Glovo is a marketplace. So the simple question is simple, kind of. When you started, from which side of the marketplace did you decide to start from? Like supply, demand, both, and why?
Yeah, we have a launching playbook, and it focuses on initially two sides of the marketplace. I think initially it's about content. So let's get the best. What I was saying earlier, the best restaurants, stores. Let's get them on board to our project. Let's explain who Glovo is, and get them to think this is interesting. I want to work with Glovo, and so you get a good base of content. And the second one, of course, is guaranteeing that what I was saying, the customer experience with the couriers, our Glovers, is going to be great. So make sure you have enough supply.
Okay.
Based on that, then you can try and get the demand side of things, which is the end customer, which is you and me who are going to order on Glovo. And I think it's generally that order. But you need to have the first two, because what you can't do is send a whole bunch of customers, hundreds, thousands of customers to an app, and actually they don't have the content they want. They don't have their favorite places, because they won't come back afterwards. They'll have a bad experience. And so we're three-tiered marketplace, and they all need to work. And then to the operational side of things, just an example. I mean, how important one related to the others. You need the customers doing the orders, because then what they do is they give liquidity to the network, and therefore the couriers have more orders per hour, therefore more income, so they earn more on our platform. And at the same time, the best partners want to work with us because we're driving incremental revenue to the ongoing business. So it's very important, this 360, that everything works together.
So you are two co-founders, so you and Oscar, and having a co-founder, me as well. How is the relationship between the two of us? I mean, is your first time as a co-founder? Have you managed to build companies by yourself? And what's the difference?
Yeah, well, I mentioned, I'm at the beginning of the podcast, I've done, I've been lucky to done a few projects, and with it, they've been quite successful. So definitely not first time for me. However, Glovo, the site it's become, and massive, it's certainly the biggest project I've ever been involved with, in the sense of from day one and leading it. So yeah, huge. And for Oscar, obviously, I met him, he was 22. So it's probably, he'd done a few things. He actually had an NGO very young, doing things. So he's also been quite entrepreneurial, even though he was very young. And I think it's we're very different stages as well of age, and I think it's complementary. I think I've tried to help him grow from being his first project to a great CEO, which he is today. He's still only 30, but what he's learned over this period and the way he manages it's fairly unique. And I think my job is more to fit the gaps and to add value, and also we've got a great C-level team now, senior, who run each unit, operations, growth, technology. So I think it's different at different stages of where you are as a company. You acquire different skill sets from different people, and me being one of those. And now I'm doing much more the institutional stuff, which is very important for us. Now we have massive businesses, so before it was often about growth, but now we really need to protect what we've already built. So in stakeholder relationships, making sure we operate, and we're massive economical impact this 360, how we drive incremental revenue to small businesses. This is super important. Digitalization of small businesses. Our courier networks are how these, thousands and thousands of people have income thanks to the platform. So we're driving macroeconomic impact within the cities where we operate. And it's very important to raise awareness of that and how we work with local governments and national governments to do this together and make sure that we're growing, but growing in the right way. And so it becomes more and more important, that part of the business. So I'm doing a lot of work with that, and I visit a lot of the countries and meet local stakeholders, and I'll often try and work together with local government, do initiatives together. How can we drive digitalization to small businesses, which I think we're all, as a society and at a government level, it's super important that small businesses can compete digitally, because otherwise you have the macro companies just taking over all commerce. And we're an accelerator in that, because at the end of the day, Glovo enables these small businesses to digitalize themselves, because in essence we're nothing without those restaurants and stores in those cities. Glovo needs that top content. We need to enable them and help them operate and sell more.
It's very interesting, Buzz, because as a customer, I've never seen Glovo as an accelerator for digitalization. I've seen just, food delivery. So I want something, I can order it. While on the other side, actually, you make digitalization grow, small businesses, and I think the impact you are having on like other countries like Africa has a completely different perspective compared, for example, to Spain and Italy, in which like the gig economy is very, criticized and accused, while over there, like you are enabling people to have better salary, better income. So you are actually making the whole economy grow, I think.
So I mean, I think in Southern Europe particularly, not the whole of Europe, gig economy is stigmatized a little bit. There's a lot of, in my opinion, false information about it. It's generally to do with the couriers. I think that, and to be honest, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the gig economy is not here to replace traditional work. It's not here to replace long term. It's generally easy access to income, with low barriers. So you can join and have it, a platform, ours or others, and be earning income almost immediately. You'll often, it's not the job of your life, and it shouldn't be. And you're there 3-6 months, and then you move on to something. So I think the going is a little bit stigmatized. And generally, the income is fairly good or better than similar type of jobs. But digitalization is much bigger than that. It's the small businesses. It's not just about us bringing them incremental revenue. Actually, we're giving them tools now that they can market their brands. They can drive incremental revenue to themselves how they see fit. Very important part of our business is building those tools more just beyond the app that our consumer sees, but beyond inside of their restaurants or stores, that they actually have tools to run their businesses in a better way digitally. This is growing, and whether we like it or not, this isn't just global. I mean, local commerce. Every year that goes by, a more higher percentage of their business will be digital, and not just delivery. It could be pickup. It could be, can I check if I've got the product in that store or restaurant, and then I'll go and get it. So there's a whole, and I think companies like Glovo can drive that and accelerate that by giving them the tools to run their businesses in a better way, and in essence compete with these huge, massive e-commerce companies which are selling often the same things. I find it very funny that we've all done this, but often I'll use an example: sneakers or trainers, or am I doing the best word? You know which trainers you want, and different brands, but and then you order them online, and literally they're coming from a warehouse, often thousands of kilometers away, and they'll deliver. And sure enough, they'll deliver in 48 hours, and it's fantastic, the UX. But pretty much those sneakers with your size are in your city, and you don't have visibility of that.
You don't know how to access them.
And literally, it literally makes no sense, even from a sustainability angle, that they're shipping them thousands. But independently of that, the speed and the UX, the user experience of getting them in 30 minutes or an hour or the same day from a store, and I think that's going to be the biggest change over the next 10 years in e-commerce, where we go from getting things from thousands of kilometers away to actually getting them from within your city, and being able and visually to be able to, when you look for those trainers or those sneakers online, that actually you can see them in your city and get them delivered whenever you want at the end of the day, when you're back at home or in your office, or literally in 30 minutes through a company like Glovo. And Glovo can be part of that. And that's what we call quick commerce, Q-commerce, which I think is going to be the fastest growing. Well, it is today. It's the fastest growing area of e-commerce. And I think it's going to be a good percentage of e-commerce in the future, which is this immediate, quick delivery, things very local to you. And that, the companies who can do that really well are going to be these local stores and restaurants and chains. Make no mistake, the chains will have that, but local stores will have those products, and we just need to have visibility of those.
From what you're saying, is like you're moving from a pure marketplace to something like SaaS-enabled marketplace, in which now you are enabling with a lot of tools and services the SME that you are already serving with the marketplace, the customers, but you're giving tools to let them grow by themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two sides. We are a marketplace, and that's our core business. But also to help our partners grow. Especially when they've identified that we're a very good source of incremental revenue. Imagine they realize that actually it's quite profitable. The 10% of the business that comes through Glovo with their current, the current store or restaurant. So they're already paying that rent. They already have that, like the same staff. Actually, 10% incremental revenue on top of that is actually very profitable for them. They would say, well, how can I drive it to become 20%? And they need the tools to that. They need to understand that maybe, investing €1 to have another order is super profitable for them. So they're willing to say, well, I'm going to invest, €1,000 this month to get, maybe another 100 orders or another 1,000 orders or whatever they might need.
Which are the 3 mistakes you have made from which you've learned the most?
We've made...
You in your career, not just Glovo, but you as a person, as a professional.
Yeah, sometimes, you have a project and you don't really see the huge potential now. So maybe sometimes you might be acquired a little bit earlier than you should have been, and things like that. I think there's been especially early on in my career, that I think sometimes a company had a lot more potential, but you have an opportunity, you don't really believe in how big the project could be. I think early on, sometimes a little bit of lack of ambition, and over time you learn that, and you surround yourself with people with more ambition as well. That's been key, I think, for me over the career, to really have co-founders who really, and I think that's why it's very important to have co-founders. When they're complementary to each other. Some can be very good, building stuff and managing, and others are the dreamers, who take it. I think that's probably one. And some of the mistakes, I don't like to say the mistakes that regret and things like that, because often your big mistakes teach you a lot. But in Glovo's case, I mean, there's one that we talk about a lot, which was when we launched in Latin America. We ended up selling the Latin American business quite well. But we launched in Brazil, and we did things very different in Brazil than we've done any other country. We normally launch in the largest city, and we get that right, and we get the playbook working, and we get the dynamics, and then we begin launching in secondary cities. Or in Brazil, for some reason, we decided to just go everywhere, and we quickly lost a lot of money. But we decided to leave the market very, very quickly, like almost 6-7 months after launching. And that was a great decision, because we were competing with, a local player who was amazing, who had great operations, great partners already. So to try and take market share of the local player was very, very difficult, in fact. And then we had two big competitors while spending a lot of money. So there was actually 4 companies, and it was very crazy, and the economics were not working out, and we decided very quickly to leave that market. So it's probably one of our economically biggest failures, but actually knowledge-wise, it was probably one of very successful. And and we've seen some of our competitors that were competing with us who didn't leave the market end up leaving the market 3 or 4 years later. And I would love to know how much they spent on that market.
Bleeding money.
Yeah.
Ok, thank you very much, Sacha.
Thank you for your time. Great.
Ciao.
Bye.
Grazie per aver ascoltato questo episodio di Product Heroes. Se l'hai trovato utile, iscriviti su YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, insomma, dove ascolti i tuoi podcast normalmente, così non ti perderai neanche un episodio. Prima di andare via, vota con 5 stelline questo podcast o scrivi un commento, una recensione. Questo ci aiuterà a raggiungere sempre più persone e quindi aumentare la diffusione della cultura di prodotto in Italia, che poi è la nostra mission finale. Quindi il podcast è soltanto uno dei tanti modi che Product Heroes utilizza per spingere la cultura di prodotti. Trovi maggiori informazioni e tutte le attività che svolgiamo su productheroes.it. Ciao e alla prossima!